how are you going to be adapting? Are you curious? Are you going to be wanting to learn new things? Like, I don't ever expect anyone to know everything. It's also your communication, how you tell your story. I really want somebody on our team that is comfortable with, being in a multitude of different situations. A lot of those things are things that are being evaluated for when I'm hiring. And I think that a lot of other companies are looking for too.
Frances, would love to welcome you to this conversation today. Of course, you are the CEO and Managing Director of WEVE Acceleration. It's an accelerator in New York. Would love if you can give a quick intro and tell us a little bit about that.
WEVE Acceleration, we've been around now for 5 years. People might know us under our former name, which was Numa, New York. We work with growth stage, primarily B2B international startups, and support them with expanding into the US market. That also extends to doing a lot of programs with various governments from around the world that'll have similar initiatives to support the companies from their countries, and then also corporate programming as well, for big corporates such as Google, IBM, et cetera.
Very cool. And so that includes direct investment in companies as well as incubating them to open up their US offices. Is that right?
Yeah, so we actually don't directly invest because our companies tend to be a bit more mature when they're coming to the US. So they're already at kind of Series A, Series B. They don't need the typical seed stage check in exchange for equity. But we do have warrants in some of the companies, but we do connect them to our network of investors if they want to raise a US round, which is an objective for a lot of the companies. But then it's also helping them very much with sales and business development and connecting to the network on developing their go-to-market strategy for the US, for a lot of times hiring and making sure that they're building out their team and starting their office, legal and compliance, and all of those different aspects that happen when a company is coming to the US, and helping them kind of know what they might not know.
Very exciting. And just for a sense of scale, about how many companies per year or an aggregate have you supported in that way?
Yeah, we're coming up on 150 companies now over the last 5 years across all of our programs. We run 3 cohorts a year of our flagship program, and on average, we have between 5 to 10 companies per cohort for that. And then when we work with governments, some different sizes and scales, sometimes we'll have a cohort of 20 companies, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 5. So we have now worked with a lot of different companies of this growth stage B2B type sector.
It looks like it's not just about landing in the US. Mentorship seems like it's a big part of what you do. I personally also attended a number of your events back when you could do that a little more freely, and they are super fun and a really cool way to get to know those companies. But yeah, what's the role of mentorship in what you do?
It's one of the most important aspects of it, because I always say, even back in the day before I took over as CEO of the company and I was program director, I used to say my role as the accelerator and as the program director is not to necessarily have all the answers. It's to be able to understand what are the unique challenges of each company and connect them to someone that does have the answers. And so our mentor network is one of the most important things for the success of the companies, because they give their advice, their expertise. They open up their network as well to people that could help the startup solve their specific challenges. And so really the knowledge base of what gets done and what's impactful comes from the mentor network and their willingness to support and give to our companies.
Love that. Well, very cool. And I'd actually love to now wind it back and hear a little bit about your journey to today, because you yourself have followed, what we might describe as a non-traditional career path. And I understand, you're even as far back as your education was focused on music. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a very non-traditional background to get to where I am today. I would have never imagined that I would be the CEO of an accelerator. In fact, I remember being like a little kid and having a career day, and they talked about entrepreneurship, and I was like, that's terrifying. Why would anyone want to do that? That sounds like a silly thing to do. So I majored in opera and music education, and, fell out of love with it for a number of reasons. I think the thing I loved about music was choir, because it was really collaborative and people are like building something beautiful together. And then as you progress, you're really the money is in a solo career as a singer, and it's very much the mentality of some person's success means my failure. And so I really didn't like that aspect of it. And so I ended up going to spending a lot of time figuring out what I might want to do. My ex-husband worked for a startup, and I really loved kind of the environment that they had. It was kind of similar to choir, where you're all together building something beautiful and creative and exciting. And I wanted in on that. And so I ended up finding like a boot camp program that was actually modeled on the same model of acceleration that Techstars is. It was actually founded by the managing directors of Techstars in Boston. So, cohort-based, curriculum-based, taught by people that are actually, working in the fields with the outcome of ideally, hopefully getting a job in startups and tech. And so I attended their marketing track. They had a development, design, sales, marketing track, and it launched my career. It was 8 weeks. It was very condensed. I then later went back to actually work at that program. I was the one of the heads of admissions for New York, so selecting all of the students and also supporting the program team, which really got me into the world of accelerators. And so when Numa, which was a global accelerator brand, had been around for 20 years, they were headquartered in France, was looking to start the New York office. I was recruited for the founding team of the New York office, started as program manager in 6 months, got promoted to program director. And before I was even there for 2 years, I had the opportunity to take over the CEO position of the office. And then in July, because you think I was at the ceiling, I actually acquired the U.S. subsidiary of Numa, and so we've rebranded now to WEVE Acceleration, but it's the same team and mission that we've had for the last 5 years.
Such an amazing story to go from bootcamp participant to bootcamp director of admissions to CEO of Accelerator a handful of years later. And it's, I want to ask, because many of our, the people who might be watching this interview, many are hiring managers, many are career switchers themselves that are evaluating what they want to do with their lives. So, in terms of thinking about the value of a boot camp and how you might learn something that's relevant in addition to the technical skills, what elements of that boot camp experience as a participant, as admissions director, as New York lead, like what stuck with you to help accelerate to where you are today?
Oh my gosh. I think the boot camp was one of the best things that I ever did. Honestly, because at the time when I was considering the boot camp, I knew I needed more education if I wanted to switch careers. Like I knew I was at a point. I had tried to network through my ex-husband's network to get a job, and everyone was like, "You have great energy, but we don't know if you can do the job." And I'm like, "That's fair." So I was looking at master's degree programs at the time, but it just felt so risky, even though that's the traditional path of education, because I was already in student loan debt from my undergrad degree, and the idea of spending not only like the money on a master's degree, which was a lot more expensive than the boot camp, as well as the amount of time to spend 2 years. And I was like, well, what if I finish that and I don't love it, right? Like, what if I am not excited about it? And so it felt way less risky to spend a lot of boot camps this one was 8 weeks, but a lot of them are 10 weeks, 12 weeks. There are some that are longer, that are 6 months, but it was a much more condensed period of time. And in the grand scheme of things, it was less money. And so I got a much larger return on investment from that than I did on my my bachelor's degree. And so I'm like a huge proponent for sort of alternative modes of education in order to get into the career path that you want to. And it doesn't work for every career path. Like if you want to go work in management consulting, go get your MBA. But if you want to be working in a startup, or if you want to be, a developer and start kind of cutting your teeth on those types of skills, I think a boot camp can be a great way to do that, because I got skills that were, but also a network, at least the way that Startup Institute was structured. All of I learned how to do Google Analytics by somebody that worked on the internal Google Analytics at Google. So that person is an expert, but that's also a relationship. And relationships are a big part of also getting a job. You need the skills, but you also need the people. And so a lot of those people that I met, both when I was a student as well as when I worked at the boot camp, those relationships are still with me today. Those are my closest people, and it has served me super well to have taken that path instead of a traditional education.
Love that. And as the comparison to, traditional grad school, it makes so much sense for certain careers or for getting access to new communities, professional communities like startups in New York or what have you. It's super important, and I think it's a good reminder for any current bootcamp participants or grads of boot camps. Like, it's not just about what you learned. You should definitely be adding those colleagues of yours and instructors on LinkedIn and keeping in touch with them later, because the network is just as valuable as the skills in some cases.
Yeah, and also actually trying ways to actually do projects. The thing that I liked about Startup Institute, which I know is not a component to every boot camp, but they did something called partner projects where they would actually, which I think is similar to what Workback is doing, where they would take us and they would give us to a company and they would mix us up. So we'd have a designer with a marketer, with a salesperson, with a developer, and we'd be given an actual problem to solve, and being able to have, or taking like an unpaid intern or internship, or finding someone that maybe is trying to start a new project, and you can cut your teeth on the skills and just sort of offer like, hey, I want to see if I can help with the skills that you're learning, because that's also really important. Like, you just learning it isn't gonna really help you apply it. So like finding also those opportunities through the relationships to start applying those skills is also something that can be really valuable and a good way to leverage boot camps, especially if you want to work in like tech and startups specifically. What you can do or what you've done is more important than anything else. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a 4-year degree or not. It's like, what are you excited about? What have you tried to build? What are some of the experiences that you've had? That's much more compelling than, having gone to a specific school.
Totally. Now, flipping over to the hiring manager side, you obviously are growing an amazing team at Weave, and you've hired many people at this point. You've also supported your portfolio companies to hire many people. I mean, these are large companies that are scaling quickly, and I think I don't know what the average headcount is for a company participating in Weave, but it's definitely a larger org. Series
Yeah,
B,
it's larger.
C.
They're not early companies. So I would say on the low end, our startups have maybe 15 to 20 employees, but we've had companies that have up to 200 to 400 employees globally already. And really, now they're thinking about how do we hire and build out the team in the US.
What kind of things do you look for, or traits do they need to exhibit to be able to, again, stand out from the pack?
I love bootcamp graduates. I think it's like a great path. I also love people with non-traditional backgrounds, people that haven't necessarily come from an MBA or, an Ivy League school. So people that, have different experiences, because they bring different perspectives to the different problems that companies are trying to solve than, if you've been fed specific information on like, this is the correct way to do business. Because especially in startups and entrepreneurship and in tech, there isn't necessarily a correct way to do business. And so I think it's really advantageous to hire those types of people. I think, it does come down to the soft skills a lot. And, even the fact that somebody has done a boot camp is like a good indicator that they're willing to take risks, that they're willing to invest in themselves in terms of growth, that they are, are comfortable with non-traditional paths, especially in a company like ours working with entrepreneurs. Like, that's really important. I want people that are, really strong communicators, that can tell their story, that are excited, that are curious. I evaluate a lot how people ask questions in an interview process. So a lot of times it still does come down to the soft skills. Like, I need to know that you have, a lot of the hard skills, et cetera, but like, it does also come down to the soft skills and those aspects of it.
Great feedback there. And, in terms of just going even a level deeper into those soft skills, could you describe, I would imagine those are things like communication, problem solving, project management. Are there any other kind of soft skills that really stand out as especially important for non-traditional candidates?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think those are a lot of the big ones, like, solving, openness to learning, and openness to feedback. Any problem can be solved, right? And so also having sort of like a positive attitude about like failure and those types of things, like, that's super, super important depending upon the environment, because you're not always going to know everything. Like, technology in itself changes all of the time. So how are you going to be adapting? Are you curious? Are you going to be wanting to learn new things? Like, I don't ever expect anyone to know everything. And so like those are some of the big things. Like it's also your communication, like how you tell your story. Like I really want somebody on our team that is, comfortable with, being in a multitude of different situations. So like I would say like a lot of those things are things that are being evaluated for when I'm hiring. And I think that a lot of other companies are looking for too.
We've had some a previous few conversations about that exact thing, and learning how to learn is the other one that's come up. So, for the
Yeah.
things you don't know, how do you approach getting smarter about those topics? Self-driven, asking for help, and those
Well,
kinds
like
of
resourcefulness, right? Like
yeah,
Google is your best friend. Like
yeah,
don't it
yep.
is a tool and use it. Like whatever, like resourcefulness is a big thing. Like or relationships. Like if you can rely on relationships to get the information that you need. Like those are the types of things like resourcefulness is so helpful. I mean, and that's also a thing for developers, like using, things like Google to figure out also code problems. Like that's a thing and that is a tool and that's something that people should use.
Maybe then we could shift to thinking about the challenges of companies that are trying to move to open up or expand in the U.S. Very typical of the types of companies that you support through Weave. Um, what are some of the main challenges in hiring that companies entering the U.S. face?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of them. First and foremost, like most of our companies are hiring for the US more like sales and operations and business development because it is oftentimes less expensive for them to keep their development teams in their home country. So that is one of the things. But like also figuring out what type of profile to hire in the US is really hard. They're like, do I have somebody super senior or do I hire more junior people that can kind of be boots on the ground, et cetera? That's one of their challenges. Also navigating kind of what is the compensation structures for the US and like how that typically works. Like how do you incentivize? Is equity exciting for people in the US? Is it more around compensation? The different HR rules are a challenge. Like in the US, you can hire and fire at will, and an employee can leave at will as well and give like 2 weeks notice or no notice at all, which is not the case in a lot of, for example, European countries. Especially also for my companies that are hiring salespeople. A lot of them come up with the challenge where, in the US, a lot of salespeople are really good at selling themselves, but, necessarily isn't the right profile to sell their product. And so there are a lot of challenges when it comes to hiring. And they also don't always have a network either, right? And so like a lot of times network driven, referrals, et cetera, can be really valuable and they don't have the always the advantage of that up right up front, people to get access to really great talent.
What are some of the hiring trends that you're seeing among portfolio companies in terms of the types of talent they're looking for? And you already mentioned sales. Is that usually the first area to grow when you're entering the U.S.?
Yeah, I would say sales is the biggest one, specifically for entering the US because, they again, my companies are typically established, they have teams abroad, and really what they need in the US is, starting to go to market with their products and services. And so having salespeople on the ground is really important. A lot of times I do tell them though to hire SDRs and more junior level people before they hire someone super senior because if you're hiring a director of sales that maybe has a lot of experience, they might say that they have a really fantastic network, et cetera, but like they're not going to fully understand your product or service. They're going to be really expensive. And it's actually a lot of times better to hire more junior people that can work alongside the founder to be building and testing out in the market, to be helping to generate leads and open doors that the founder is ultimately closing. And so having, building out that playbook of how to do it and then giving it to the team is much more beneficial than hiring a senior person and saying you figure it out, because that almost never works, and I've seen a lot of companies struggle with that because it's not the best way to go about it. I have been seeing though also, I mean, with the advent of COVID, new virtual world that we're living in, is that like, companies are not just hiring in specific locales, even when they come to the US. Like they're much more open to remote work across the country. And so it actually is a big opportunity because rather than just having to have a main office in New York where you're hiring a lot of talent here, they also might have customers in Chicago or in Texas, and they can also hire remote salespeople in different locations to be able to also deliver out kind of the work and scope of things that they need to continue to build. So there have also been advantages to that, and that's definitely one of the things that we've seen be a little bit different since the now way that we work.
Again, reminder for both employees and employers that sort of the world is different than it was 2 years ago, and virtual work is not going away. Obviously, New York City is always going to be there, and major cities and home offices. That's an important part of work, but it would be extremely limiting to only be looking regionally at for talent that can physically come to the office. You're kind of skipping over a huge swath of people,
Yeah,
and again, for bootcamp grads too, don't just look in your home city. You should zoom out, look for virtual roles on a national basis.
exactly.
I did read, I think it was an op-ed, Daily News, did you
Yeah, New
say it
York Daily
was?
News.
About the startup visa.
Mhm.
And this would be a different type of way for someone looking to move to the US to get in sooner, or otherwise have it be a little bit easier by participating in a startup. And I'd love if you could just share kind of a high level synopsis of that article and generally why it's so important.
Yeah, so there's a bill called the American Competes Act, which is primarily designed, and there's a number of components in the bill to compete with China, and for talent and for other things. And one of the things in that is having a specific. There's immigration reform, both for like PhDs and for them to get green cards faster, but there's also an entrepreneurship visa, which would be the first of its kind for the US. A lot of other countries, like Canada, for example, have had entrepreneurship visas where they want to be able to attract talent from abroad to their country, and make it really easy for innovation to grow and flourish there. And we have not had something like that in the U.S. And it's been traditionally extremely difficult for people to get visas. My entrepreneurs have struggled to get specific visas. Like for the program, they would come oftentimes, especially from Europe, on an ESTA, which is a tourist visa, for the duration of the program, or sometimes they'd be able to get like an L1 to be able to do some business here. But it would always be really challenging to find something that's a more permanent solution for them being able to build out in the US market. Like there's an O1, which is the exceptional visa, but it also requires that you can prove that you've like judged things and won awards, which some entrepreneurs have been able to do abroad, but not always the easiest. Or there have been H-1B paths for entrepreneurs if they partner with a university, but it's not always easy to figure out how to actually partner with the university and which universities to partner with. So it would be, really great to be able to have entrepreneurs have a dedicated visa that would allow them to work in the US, to be able to build out their company and have that period of time that's dedicated for them. So that's what we're excited about with the Competes Act, and hopefully that will get passed. My business partner and our COO, she is here now on an H-1B visa, but it has been a journey to get her to that point. She started with me actually as an intern on a J1. She actually turned down a full-time role in France to come to New York to intern, and had no promise of a full-time role, but she was fantastic. And so we wanted to hire her. We did the H-1B lottery, which is a lottery. So you have no idea if you're going to get it or not, and you have to pay money for it. So for a small business, that can be really challenging to say, okay, I'm going to invest this money, and then I have no idea if I'm going to be able to get this person to actually work at my company is a risk for small companies. We didn't get the lottery the first time. So then we ended up having her do an F1 visa. So she already had 2 master's degrees, but she went to school for a third in the US so that she could get something called OPT, which would allow her to work full time with us. In that period of time, we started working on an O1 visa. And so I was giving her all of my speaking engagements so that she could start to prove out the fact that, she was exceptional, which she is. And then finally, in that process, the H-1B lottery came around again. We applied, we miraculously got it. And so now she's with us on an H-1B. But even that, with the pandemic and everything that was going on with immigration, she went home for the holidays in 2020, in December of 2020, to go see her family. And because she had a new H-1B, she wasn't able to get back into the country for more than a year. So she actually just arrived back in the country, yes, like last month, and is now finally back in New York. But it has been really hard to be able to like have this exceptional person that owns a large percentage of the business be in the US. And so I'm really hopeful, both from like a personal perspective and then also for all of the entrepreneurs and students and those that, want to come to the US to be able to do that, because we're turning away amazing talent. US is founded on the fact that like we are innovative, and a lot of that comes from the fact that we have so many immigrants. Like 55% of unicorn companies were founded by immigrant entrepreneurs, which is billions and billions of dollars of economic contributions because of immigrants. And so I'm passionate and very excited about hopefully getting a
Yeah.
better visa.
It's a real advantage to have smart people that want to come to the US and build a career in technology.
Yeah.
Let's let that become easier. Why not?
Yeah.
Makes so much sense. I do want to maybe double click into, again, just because you have so much exposure to companies that are successful, growing, and moving to the US. Any tactics or strategies you've seen for people moving into New York for the first time, for example, just started a job at a portfolio company at Weave? Like, what should they be doing? Where should they be spending their time?
Meeting people, again, going back to like the network aspect. So like I also hire a lot of international people. So like, yes, Julia, my COO, is from Italy, but like, you know outside of that, I think I am the only person currently on the team. We have a new person starting who's American, but I'm the only person on the team that is originally American. Everyone else is from everywhere else, and we hire a lot of interns from abroad, et cetera, that are coming to New York for the first time and starting kind of new roles and jobs. And like I always tell them, like, you need to be networking, building relationships. Like that is some of the most important aspects of what you're going to do, is building a network, because it's going to be like, as you have problems that you need to solve, being able to rely on a network is really critical. Being able to, and also for your own career. I always tell people that work with us, especially because we run an accelerator. And so like, if I have someone that works with me that doesn't take, even as like an intern, that doesn't take advantage of the fact that we have a huge network of mentors and experts, like, you've done it wrong. You failed at the internship if you haven't met our mentors, et cetera. And then also just like an openness to like feedback. And that's both for like employees, and then also for the startups too. Like the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones that are willing to say, I don't know these things. Like I may have a really successful business abroad, but like I don't know everything about the culture in the US. And I need help. I need support. Like these are the things I'm bad at, and I would love to like have support on those things, or please tell me the things that I'm not doing well so that I can get better at them. Whether that's an employee or an entrepreneur, I think those are the people that are most successful, especially in the US, is just being like, okay, I don't know everything, I'm humble about that, and that's okay.
How have you seen people ask for help or mentorship, or just otherwise reach out to you personally, and frame that in a way that's not feeling like they need their hand held, or asking for too much of your time? So, are there any tactics that you can give for someone looking to network, or maybe they're in an apprenticeship, and they're looking to meet some colleagues in the company?
Oh, I love this question. It's funny because we have a marketing intern with us right now, and she's so good, and she asks the best questions, which is part of like one of the great things. Like she asks me really good questions. She comes super prepared to my one-on-ones with me, and she's just like, so like I'm interviewing for these other internships for the summer, and I'm thinking about this. Like, what do you think? Or like I'm looking. There was literally that question, like, how do I get myself a mentor without being like, will you be my mentor? And just like weirdly proposing, because it feels really awkward, and it feels like I'm asking a lot of this person's time, etc. Like that's not great. So what I told her, and what I tell a lot of people, is to have like really specific asks. Like I have a bunch of mentors that in my brain are my mentors. I don't think I've ever said to them, you are my mentor. Like I've never been like, and like that has never been that conversation. But like, I come to them when I have specific challenges that I know that they would have expertise to solve. And I have a very specific ask. And it's the same thing for my startups. Like when they are looking to get mentorship or an introduction to a mentor that like we haven't pre-set up for them, because we do that, I'm like, okay, like you need to send me an email that's like super clear and concise, like that says exactly why you want to meet with this person, exactly why that person is relevant, like how you want to use their time. And then like a very brief description about you or your company, so that they're really clear on, some background information and why you might be interesting for them to talk to. And so Like, that's how it is. Like, even when I was going through the acquisition process with Weave, I didn't say, hey, you're my mentor, let's like meet now. I was like, I am thinking about XYZ thing. This is what's going on. I'd love to get your advice and perspective because you have, run XYZ companies, and, I really trust and value your advice. Or if you want to meet with another person in the company and say, hey, you can say, hey, I'm like new. You're in a role that like I'm very interested in. I'd love to learn more about like the department you work for. Would you be open for 30 minutes of time? I also tell people to make it as easy as possible for them to say yes. So like, I don't like to use Calendly links as much as possible. I'm like, giving them, especially if you're making an ask, like these are specific times that work for me. It makes it easier for them to opt in rather than going into a link and going back and forth. You just want to make it super, 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 super easy for the person. As you're making asks for those times, for those mentors, for those types of things. But have a specific thing in mind that you want to talk about, and then ask the person. And it's primarily on you to make the mentor opportunity work, not on the mentor. You're going to have much more success with them if you're very concrete, specific, concise, respectful of their time because they're giving something. Like that's, and also think of ways to give value back too. I always say, like, even if you're starting off in your career, there's always things that you can do to give value back to those that are helping you. And thinking about that also helps you build a more mutual relationship moving forward.
Try a few people to be the right fit for
Yeah.
your mentor. You may not get it right the first time. Maybe that person's busy. Maybe they have other commitments. Maybe they never reply because your email went to spam. Don't take that personally. That's easy for sales folks, but people from technology careers or from boot camps might be a little less comfortable with the idea of being ghosted or rejection flat out. And like those are going to come. In sales, you need to email 10 people to even get one reply if you're lucky, maybe 100. Be comfortable with some people not wanting to be a mentor, and work with those who do.
Yeah, and people are busy. I always appreciate when people follow up. Like it's never a thing where I'm like offended that like, oh, they followed up with me. A lot of times, like I literally will have been steeped in a project and I have 90 emails in like 7 hours that I haven't gotten to or something. And so I will sometimes lose emails. And so when somebody follows up with me, I'm actually like, oh my God, thank you. Cause like people don't want to not respond. It's just sometimes they're just overwhelmed or a lot of things are going on. So it's never, I always tell people to follow up. It's a good thing. And most people aren't going to be upset by it. And you can follow up more than you think you can.
Yeah, and that's what a shame if you just put together this beautiful email, you send it out, they never get it, and you never follow up, and it just dies on the vine. When just a quick, hey, Bill, don't know if you saw this, but would love to follow up. I know I emailed you on Christmas Eve at midnight, but maybe now that it's the new year, you have some time. Like, keep in mind, people have lives, people are busy, and the pandemic happened and people have Zoom fatigue too. So
Yeah.
another comment as well, just a bit of an aside, doesn't always have to be a video call. You can, some folks just pick up the phone, give them a shout, and don't rely so much on the video format because it's exhausting. In terms of how people can learn more about Weave and follow along and maybe get to know some of the companies in the portfolio, as well as companies looking to apply to Weave, what's the best way to learn more?
So our website is at www.weave, which is WEVE, acceleration.com. And I would also say to check out our LinkedIn page. It's super active. A lot of times we're posting about the different cohorts, the startups, upcoming applications, our mentors. So you can see a lot of what our mentors are doing and successes of our alumni. So I also think that's a great place to check out, which you can also link through from our website. And we have an upcoming cohort.
Awesome.
We just opened up selection for our summer 2022 cohort.
Very exciting. Well, congratulations on the continued success and growth. It'll be a huge year, and I look forward to following along. Thank you so much, and we'll speak again soon.
Thank you, Chris.